February 1920, Baltimore, Maryland. In a Stark laboratory at Johns Hopkins University, beneath the hum of early electric bulbs and the hush of academic ambition, a 9-month-old infant sat on a mattress, wide-eyed and curious. His name was Albert. Little Albert, to history a quiet, healthy baby with soft tufts of blonde hair and a temperament so calm that researchers described him as stolid. He had no idea that within weeks, his innocence would be weaponized in the name of science, or that his cries would echo through psychology textbooks for over a century. This is the story not just of an experiment, but of a child who became a symbol, a ghost, haunting the conscience of a discipline that once believed it could mold human nature like clay. John B. Watson was a man on a mission, charismatic, ambitious, and fiercely convinced that psychology should be a true science, measurable, observable, predictable. He rejected the introspective musings of Freudian psychoanalysis. To Watson, thoughts and feelings were unscientific shadows. What mattered was behavior, what people did, not what they felt. His radical idea that all human behavior, love, rage, fear, even personality itself was learned through experience. And if behavior could be learned, it could also be unlearned or engineered. To prove it, he needed a blank slate. And in 1919, he found one, a baby boy living at the Harriet Lane Home for Invalid Children, where his mother worked as a wet nurse. For a small sum, reportedly just $1, she agreed to let her son participate in tests. She likely never imagined what those tests would entail. At first, the sessions seemed harmless. Researchers showed Albert a white rat. He reached for it, giggling. They presented a rabbit, a dog, cotton wool, burning newspapers, even a Santa Claus mask. The baby showed no fear, only curiosity. Then came the noise. Behind Albert's chair, Watson struck a steel bar with a hammer. The crash was deafening, a sound designed to startle even adults. Albert jumped, his breath catching, eyes wide with terror. He burst into tears. They repeated this pairing. White rat, loud bang. White rat, loud bang. White rat, loud bang. By the 7th pairing, something chilling happened. The moment the rat appeared without any noise, Albert recoiled. He whimpered. He crawled away as fast as his tiny limbs could carry him. The rat alone now triggered panic. Watson had done it. He had conditioned fear, but he didn't stop there. Days later, Albert was shown a white rabbit. He screamed. "A fur coat?" he cried. "A Santa Claus mask with a fluffy white beard?" He arched his back in distress, desperate to escape. Even a researcher wearing a lab coat with white hair triggered his terror. The fear had spread, a phenomenon Watson called stimulus generalization. The child wasn't just afraid of rats. He was afraid of anything white and furry. His world, once safe and full of wonder, had become a landscape of hidden threats. Watson planned to reverse the conditioning, to cure Albert, using techniques that would later inspire exposure therapy. But before he could, tragedy intervened. Albert's mother removed him from the study. Some say she got a new job. Others suggest she grew uneasy. Whatever the reason, the boy vanished from Watson's records and from psychological care. No deconditioning, no follow-up, no attempt to soothe the fears implanted in his mind. For decades, little Albert remained a cipher, a pseudonym in a journal article, a case study stripped of humanity. But in 2009, historians unearthed evidence suggesting his real name was Douglas Merritt, the son of a Johns Hopkins wet nurse. Even more disturbingly, Medical records revealed Douglas suffered from hydrocephalus, a neurological condition causing fluid buildup in the brain. If true, Watson may have unknowingly or perhaps knowingly used a neurologically impaired child to demonstrate a theory about normal human learning. Douglas died at age 6, likely from complications of his condition. We'll never know whether the fear Watson gave him lingered until the end. At the time, there were no ethics boards, no institutional review boards, IRBs, no codes protecting human subjects. But even by 1920s standards, many colleagues were uneasy. How could you justify traumatizing a baby? Yet the experiment succeeded in its goal. It electrified the field of psychology. It became a cornerstone of behaviorism, influencing everything from advertising to education to psychiatric treatment. Decades later, B.F. Skinner would build on Watson's ideas, shaping theories of operant conditioning that still inform behavioral therapy today. But as psychology matured, so did its conscience. By the mid-20th century, after the horrors of Nazi medical experiments came to light, the scientific community began demanding ethical safeguards. The Nuremberg Code, 1947. The Declaration of Helsinki, 1964. And eventually, the APA Ethics Code, all enshrined principles Watson ignored. Informed consent, minimization of harm, the right to withdraw. Today, the little Albert experiment is taught not as a triumph, but as a cautionary tale. It appears in ethics courses alongside Milgram's obedience studies and Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment. Brilliant, influential, and deeply flawed. More than a century later, little Albert's legacy endures not in data points, but in questions. What do we owe the vulnerable when we seek knowledge? Can scientific progress ever justify human suffering? And who speaks for the voiceless when history reduces them to a footnote? Albert never chose to be a subject. He never gave consent. He didn't understand why the world suddenly turned frightening. All he knew was that something soft and white once brought joy and then brought terror. In the end, the boy who learned to fear became more than an experiment. He became a mirror, reflecting both the power and the peril of playing God with the human mind. And in every modern ethics protocol requiring compassion, caution, and care, his silent cry still resonates. Though lost to anonymity for generations, efforts continue to honor the real child behind the myth. In 2012, a memorial plaque was placed near the site of the original experiment, not to celebrate Watson's genius, but to remember the infant whose brief participation changed psychology forever. Because science, at its best, doesn't just seek truth, it seeks humanity.